As the world continues to change and evolve, money starts to lose value. I work at the East River Diner in downtown Waverly, so I have seen firsthand the effects of the minimum wage and the pandemic on the restaurant industry. Money makes the material world go round, and if the minimum wage changes, everything in our country and our economy changes as well. Let's take a look at how the minimum wage would force small businesses to close, increase the price of consumer goods, and also increase the joblessness rate if it was increased to $15. According to the 2019 article from Britannica's procon.org titled "Should the Federal Minimum Wage Be Increased?", the federal minimum wage was created in 1938 during the Great Depression at 25 cents an hour. Congress has changed it 22 times since, with the most recent being in 2009 when it went from $6.55 to $7.25 an hour. 1.8 million people currently earn the minimum wage or below. The 2019 article titled "Minimum Wage in America, a Timeline" by Patrick J. Kiger states that the federal minimum wage applies to U.S. workers who are employed by businesses that bring in a minimum revenue of $500,000 per year. Increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 would result in the closure of small and local businesses, especially those who are suffering due to the pandemic. According to the 2019 article from Britannica's procon.org titled "Should the Federal Minimum Wage Be Increased?", 60% of small business owners say that increasing the minimum wage would significantly hurt their business. The vice president of the restaurant chain White Castle says that if the minimum wage was raised, almost half of their stores around the country would be forced to close, laying off thousands of employees. The 2019 article by Jack Kelly titled "The Unintended Consequences of Raising the Minimum Wage to $15" says that local businesses would only bring in thinner profits if the minimum wage was increased. This means that prices would be forced to increase, meaning that businesses would get even less business. As a result, workers would be laid off. According to Rachel Gessler's 2021 article titled "A $15 Minimum Wage is a Bad Idea," 1 in every 5 restaurants were forced to close their doors permanently in 2020. For a restaurant with 5 full-time minimum wage workers, increasing the pay to $15 an hour would cost the business an extra $85,800 in wages and taxes per year. Restaurant profits are about 5%, which means that if the minimum wage was increased to $15, it would require an extra $1.7 million in food sales per year, which is equivalent to $4,700 per day. In Isabel Soto's 2021 article titled "Examining the Effects of Raising the Federal Minimum Wage to $15, it mentions that from January 2020 to April 2020, there is a 50% reduction in open small businesses. While workers are getting temporary compensation from the government for the COVID relief funds, businesses are not. This means that businesses are struggling to absorb the revenue that they lost due to the pandemic. Elevating the minimum wage would not only cause small businesses to close, but it would also increase the price of consumer products. The 2019 article from Britannica's procon.org titled "Should the Federal Minimum Wage Be Increased?" states that if the minimum wage was raised, fast food restaurants would pass almost 100% of their increasing labor costs onto their customers, with other industries being forced to follow suit. Increasing the minimum wage for earners in the food industry would result in the price increase of anywhere from 4.3% to 25%, or portion decrease between 12% and 70%. According to Alex McIntyre's 2019 article titled "The Dream of a $15 Minimum Wage Gets a Reality Check from Inflation," says that once the short amount of time when raising the minimum wage sees beneficial outcomes ends, inflation will steadily eat away at the minimum wage's buying power. Like this graph shows, Iowa earns a $7.25 minimum wage compared to California's $15.92 or Nevada's $9.29. So the cost of living is different in each state, but raising the minimum wage would have a profound effect on the economy. The purchasing power or real value of a maximum national income value maxes out at $12.50 before assuming inflation serves as the bulk of prices. Raising the minimum wage would also increase the joblessness rate. The 2019 article from Britannica's procon.org titled "Should the Federal Minimum Wage Be Increased?" realized that a minimum wage increase from $7.25 to just $10.10 would result in the loss of 500,000 jobs. 38% of employers who pay minimum wage say that they would lay off workers, and 54% of employers say that they would decrease hiring levels if the minimum wage was raised. In San Francisco alone, a minimum wage increase of $15 would essentially delete 15,270 jobs. A 10% increase in pay leads to a 1 to 3% decrease in employment of low-skilled workers. According to Isabel Soto's 2021 article titled "Examining the Effects of Raising the Minimum Wage to $15, an increased minimum wage of $15 by 2025 would result in the loss of 1.4 million jobs." In Rachel Gesser's 2021 article titled "A $15 Minimum Wage is a Bad Idea," she says that the employment in food services decreased by 19%, while jobs in retail fell 24%, and jobs in accommodations dropped 32% in 2020. A $15 federal minimum wage translates into over $36,000 per year in wages and benefits. This means that any jobs that don't produce at least $36,000 a year will eventually be eliminated completely. According to Niels Valdhuis and Sylvia Leroy's article titled "Does the Minimum Wage Need to be Raised?" For every 10-cent increase in the minimum wage, there is a 1.4 to 4.4% decrease in youth employment rate. Raising the minimum wage also increases the amount of high school dropouts, as young adults see that they can earn more money right now versus going to college. Veronica De Ruggi's 2016 article titled "Why a $15 minimum wage should scare us" states that businesses like those in the food industry, whose payroll costs could represent close to 1/3 of operating expenses, will respond to a 100% increase in wages for their low-skilled workers, meaning that they will probably be forced to unemploy many of their workers. 99.7% of businesses within the U.S. are small, which means they're not large and wealthy like Google or Amazon. This has a profound effect on the minimum wage because it could mean a loss of millions of jobs. Experts estimate that an increased minimum wage of $15 could result in the loss of upwards of 9 million jobs. Increasing the minimum wage could cause many negative economic problems in the United States. It could impact the life of every American, whether it be through the closure of small businesses, the increased price of consumer goods, or the increasing joblessness rate. So while it is mostly up to our government what happens with our minimum wage, it is our responsibility to stand up and speak out against this potentially destructive economic decision. If the minimum wage increases, our life as we know it will change in dramatic negative ways.